If you've ever stared at the ceiling at 2 in the morning wondering if your toddler, or your teenager for that matter, is getting enough rest, I promise you, you are absolutely not alone. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to dive into the official pediatric sleep guidance to give you a really clear, completely stress-free understanding of what your child actually needs. We're going to look at the data and translate it into a highly practical approach that actually works for your unique family.
Okay, let's just get this out of the way right off the bat and acknowledge that relatable stress we parents feel when we watch the clock, panicking that our kid isn't hitting some magical number. We have all heard statements like, well, my 7-year-old sleeps 9 hours, so that should be enough. Or maybe, my teenager sleeps 10 hours on the weekend, so their school week is totally fine, right? Honestly, this kind of thinking usually just leads to unnecessary anxiety. We've kind of been conditioned to view sleep as this rigid scorecard, and when our kids don't hit the perfect mark, we immediately feel like we're failing.
So here is our agenda today. 1. The sleep numbers trap. 2. Age-based sleep ranges. 3. Beyond the sleep chart. 4. Understanding teenage sleep needs. And 5. The 6-part sleep check.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the sleep numbers trap, and why our ranges are guidance, not scorecards.
It is so incredibly easy to fall into the comparison trap, isn't it? You might catch yourself thinking, well, your brother only needs 9 hours, or you really should be sleeping as long as your cousin does. But we need to totally reframe how we look at this. The absolute most crucial point here is that healthy sleep guidance is given as a flexible range. Why? Because every single child is uniquely different. The lower and upper ends of a range are not pass-fail lines. One totally healthy kid might function brilliantly near the lower end, while another simply needs more. And by the way, more sleep is not automatically better. The goal isn't to force your child to reach the absolute maximum number just to win some imaginary sleep competition. Spoiler alert, there are literally no trophies for having the most exhausted teenager. We also have to keep in mind that a child's sleep needs can fluctuate temporarily. Maybe they're fighting off a cold, going through a developmental leap, or just playing a ton of sports.
Moving on to section 2, age-based sleep ranges, from newborns to teens. Okay, so let's look at the actual baseline data provided by current public health guidance and the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. For newborns 0 to 3 months, we're looking at about 14 to 17 hours. Infants up to a year need 12 to 16 hours. Toddlers need 11 to 14, and preschoolers need 10 to 13. Now, for all of those younger groups, please remember this absolutely vital detail. Daytime naps count. A 2-year-old who sleeps 11 hours at night and naps for an hour and a half during the day is not just getting 11 hours of sleep, they're getting 12 and a half. For school-age kids, 6 to 12 years old, the recommendation is 9 to 12 hours, and teens need 8 to 10. These are total amounts across a full 24-hour period, and they serve as an excellent science-backed baseline.
Which brings us to section 3, beyond the sleep chart. We're looking at quality, timing, and the math of bedtime. So hitting those target numbers is an awesome start for sure, but duration is only one piece of the healthy sleep puzzle. What's really fascinating, and honestly a bit of a game changer for parents, is how clearly we have to separate the moment a child actually gets into bed from the restorative time they spend sleeping. It's a huge misconception that time in bed equals time asleep. For example, say your kid goes to bed at 9 p.m. and wakes up at 7 a.m. Wow, that looks like a perfect 10-hour window, right? But wait. That child might take 30 minutes to wind down, wake up twice during the night, and then lay in bed awake for 20 minutes before finally getting up. Now, we don't need to run a sleep lab in our homes, but we absolutely must build enough buffer room into the schedule for the bedtime routine and the totally normal biological process of, actually falling asleep.
Let's make this super practical. We're going to do a little reverse math to figure out a realistic bedtime so you aren't setting impossible goals for your kids. You always want to begin with the required wake time, not the bedtime you just wish your child would happily accept. Let's say you've got a 10-year-old who absolutely has to be up at 6:45 a.m. for school. If you set a bedtime that only allows for exactly 8 hours in the bedroom, you're actually putting them below the general recommendation for their age once you factor in that settling time we just talked about. So you estimate their needed range, add in a buffer for them to settle down, and boom, that gives you a realistic target bedtime. And hey, if the math doesn't work out, you might actually need to shift dinner, homework, or screen time earlier in the evening.
But hey, we also have to talk about quality. Because remember, a child can spend plenty of hours in bed and still suffer from daytime sleepiness if the quality of that sleep is terrible. Consider these really common disruptors: frequent night waking, breathing problems, loud snoring, or even just a noisy bedroom can deeply fragment a night's rest. For older kids, repeated phone checking under the covers is just a massive disruptor. And regularity matters immensely too. A schedule that shifts by several hours between school days and weekends, like that teenager who sleeps 10 hours on Saturday after scraping by on 6 hours all week, that actually makes falling asleep and waking up significantly harder over time.
All right, Section 4. Understanding teenage sleep needs, dealing with biological shifts and packed schedules. Teenagers. They will fight bedtime, they suddenly have boundless energy at 11 p.m., and frankly, they can easily trick us into thinking they just don't need much sleep. But honestly, that's almost always an illusion. Adolescence brings a massive biological shift toward later sleep timing. Their internal clocks are literally pushing them to stay awake later. But at the exact same time, early high school schedules, hours of homework, sports, and chatting with friends are dramatically shrinking their available sleep window. So you've got to look out for specific clues to see if those early schedules are causing actual sleep deprivation. Are they having immense difficulty dragging themselves out of bed? Are they sleeping until noon on weekends just to recover? Do they rely heavily on caffeine, snap at you constantly, or fall asleep in the car or on the bus? A teenager might actually get so used to feeling exhausted that they stop mentioning it entirely. So as parents, we have to respect their growing independence while still fiercely protecting a realistic sleep opportunity for them.
Section 5. The 6-part sleep check. This is your practical action plan. Here is a concrete, completely guilt-free action plan you can implement at home today. Part 1. Find the age-based range for your child. And remember, naps totally count for the little ones. Part 2. Calculate backward from their required wake time, making sure to add in that extra time to settle. Part 3. Observe 2 typical weeks. Part 4. Review their daytime signs, things like persistent sleepiness, irritability, or dozing off during quiet activities. Part 5 is absolutely critical. Adjust only one condition at a time. Maybe move the bedtime routine just 15 minutes earlier, or cut out screens right before bed, or tweak a nap time. Small targeted changes are so much easier to evaluate than totally overhauling your entire family's schedule in one night. And Part 6, if you do all this and the pattern is still really concerning, don't hesitate to seek guidance from a qualified healthcare professional.
Let's zoom in on that observation piece for a second. Tracking these habits over 14 days helps you focus on the big picture, the overall pattern, and their daytime functioning, rather than overanalyzing one single rough night, because one bad night does not define a pattern. Over those 2 weeks, just take some simple notes on when the bedtime routine begins, approximate lights out, estimated sleep time, and any obvious daytime sleepiness. The key here is not to hover over your child all night or turn this into some stressful surveillance op. You are just looking for trends. Are school nights drastically shorter than weekends? Is the wind-down routine starting early enough? Just observe.
When you reach the end of those 2 weeks, you can finally adjust the schedule based on actual evidence, rather than comparing yourself to other parents or drowning in guilt. Ultimately, the exact question you should be asking yourself isn't, what is the one perfect bedtime? Instead, ask yourself this: does my child have a realistic opportunity to receive enough regular, restorative sleep for healthy daytime functioning? That right there is the true measure of success. It allows you to drop the parental guilt, stop comparing your kids to everyone else's, and just focus on what genuinely matters for your child's well-being. Remember, healthy sleep is an ongoing process, not a perfect score. So, what is one small adjustment you can test out tonight to give your child the gift of better sleep? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.